Okay, folks, today's topic is forced migration. And I've gone for this photograph because I think it sums up what forced migration is all about, essentially. These wildebeest, it's often a classic scene in a sort of David Attenborough documentary. These wildebeest are forced to migrate across the rivers of Africa because of the climate. The climate they live in is very seasonal. The rains move. That obviously affects where the grass is growing, and if they want to stay alive and stay healthy, they have to follow the rains. So they are forced to migrate because otherwise life would be very difficult, or indeed they might not survive. So that's what this topic is all about, and that really then comes to the definition: moving because you fear for your life. All right, that is the key thing for you to remember. And then it brings some different groups, which we'll be picking up on in just a second. So the thing with most types of migration actually is that you need to know about these four things, and I'm sure your teacher will have told you this in class. If you want to organise your notes with these four sections, it's quite a good way to learn all the different types of migration in this module. Okay, so key facts and figures, causes, impacts, responses. Right, here are some key facts and figures for you. I'm sure that the data can be updated when you learn this in class, because unfortunately I'm sure the number will just keep growing. When I made this video, these were the most up-to-date figures I could get, but like I say, just have a double check either in class or possibly just on an internet search yourselves. So there are 89.3 million forcibly displaced, and there's those words that I just mentioned: internally displaced people, asylum seekers, refugees. Right, let's talk about this. Forced migration, moving because you fear for your life. If you stay in the same country but you've moved within that country, you are an internally displaced person. So let's say war broke out between Somerset and Devon because of cream teas, I don't know, something like that. Hopefully that will never happen. And let's say I ran away, because I'm a massive coward and I definitely wouldn't get involved, and I run away to Yorkshire. I'm an internally displaced person. I'm in the same country, but I have moved. What I might do is I might run away to France, okay? And initially, when I got to France, I would be what's called an asylum seeker. So when you go to another country because you fear for your life, initially you are an asylum seeker. And what that means is you've asked to stay in that country, you've asked to be protected under refugee status, but the country is making their decision. So you are held, if you like, at asylum seeker status. The country that you've asked to stay in then has a choice to make. They can either let you stay as a refugee and give you protected refugee status, or they can deport you. That is a job. It's not a job that I would like to do, but actually making the decision about these people's lives. Tricky. So that is quite important terminology, just for you to be aware of. Right, the causes are pretty obvious, aren't they? So under international law, refugees have this very precise definition. I don't need you to learn that definition off by heart, but what I would need is for you to see that that is all about human stuff. It's humans persecuting other humans for race, religion, nationality, social, all that sort of stuff. Now, there is a debate about physical geography, because you can be forced to move because of a volcanic eruption, because of sea level rise, because of a hurricane, all those kinds of things. So just be careful. Forced migration, moving because you fear for your life, But technically, the precise definition of refugee is a little bit more precise. But forced migration is more generalised. Okay, but it's not going to catch you out in any particular detail. Right, impacts. Rather than international economic migration, which might involve you moving to another continent or the other side of the world, this is usually you get to safety and you stop moving. Not always, but that is usually it. Okay, it's huge volumes. International economic migration might be, a few hundred people per year. This is likely to be thousands in a few days or a week. So it's a lot of people in a short period of time. If war or fighting is involved, it does mean that your migrants tend to be more women and children, because I know we're being gender specific here, but it is still true that more men tend to fight in the wars. So it tends to have a gender and age bias. The refugees often have nothing with them. It's not like you've sat down and thought about this for ages. You grab what you can and you get out of there. So you don't have very much stuff with you. You often end up in a refugee camp, and we're picking up on those in a bit. The analogy I always use is, imagine your best mate turns up at your house and something's gone wrong and they need somewhere to sleep over. Well, hopefully you would be in a position to offer them somewhere to stay, until that situation had resolved. Now imagine a coach load of your mates turn up at your house. Even if you're the nicest person on the planet, you probably don't have enough sofas, beds, lilos, all of those kinds of things for all of your mates to stay in your house. The best that you might be able to do is put a tent in the garden. And that's the same thing. Because you get so many people in such a short space of time, that's where refugee camps come from. It's not trying to be mean, it's we've got nowhere else to put you kind of thing. And also, because they usually stop at the nearest safe place, there is a pattern whereby usually forced migration happens in less developed countries. Not always, but usually. And the country next door is probably therefore also a less economically developed country. And so there is a quite big financial strain of having all of these extra people that turn up in your country. So they're kind of the main issues. And this is, for two reasons. Refugee camp, in case you've not seen pictures of them, but also we are going to be talking next about who looks after refugees, and I thought you'd like to see that the tents, as you can see, are branded. This is a slightly more permanent one. That's, I'd say, very much quick, let's build a few tents, but the United Nations logo is still there. And again, a slight variation, but again, the United Nations logo is there. So refugee camps exist because it's about housing lots of people in a short space of time. What you are then supposed to know is, what do we do? Who looks after refugees? What's going on with that? So there are three groups that you are supposed to know about. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR. Don't worry if you forget that whole acronym. As long as you know that the United Nations, part of what they do is look after refugees, I would be perfectly happy with that. I don't think knowing the full thing is going to get you any brownie points. NGOs, non-governmental organisations, and I've given you two examples here. The Red Cross and Oxfam are two excellent examples. They're not the only ones, but they are two NGOs who do work quite extensively with this. And then, of course, you've got the governments of the countries that these people end up in. And I've used Poland as your main example here because of the Ukraine crisis. So Poland is the country where most people who've left Ukraine, there are a lot of internally displaced people in Ukraine as well, but if they have actually left, a lot of them have gone to Poland. Now, what I'm not going to do in this video is go into the same level of detail that I would if we were in class, but it's just sensible for you to know a little bit about the roles and responsibilities that these three have. And you will, of course, have access to the PowerPoint via Teams, and you'll be able to open the PowerPoint at that point. But if I don't teach you or you don't have access to this, you can see the kinds of things to put into a search engine. So just find out about the UNHCR and what they do and all of that. They've also, this is quite interesting, they have this article about the 5 biggest refugee camps in the world, and it gives you quite an eye-opening idea of what it's like, because sometimes you end up living in a refugee camp for years of your life. I mean, it's a really long time. So the UNHCR look after refugees, and the thing that they usually do is provide the camps and make sure that international law is followed. So that's them. The NGOs often do a lot of the healthcare, the food. They might try and set up some kind of education capabilities, because if you're a child and you're in a refugee camp for years, you are going to miss out on a huge part of your education. So they kind of complement what the UNHCR do. And then the governments usually have to do the admin, because if you have asked to be a refugee, you've got the whole administrative task to sort out there. You also have to provide the land for the camp, or possibly other places, because some refugees will not live in camps, they will live in other places, probably the cities of that country, and then you need to look after them in those places. So your case studies are Ukraine and Kenya. These are different to the case studies we used a few years ago, because that's the thing about geography, it changes, which is a good thing, keeps us on our toes. I'm not going to go into lots of detail here about Ukraine. I think most people have got the basics. Invaded by Russia, partly to do with the ports. Most of Russia's ports are what we would call cold water ports, which means that certainly for the winter and other parts of the year, they're really tricky. There is a thought that what they missed after Ukraine got independence in 1991 was the warm water port of the Black Sea. Now, I'm not saying that this was the only reason that Putin decided to invade, but it certainly is one of them, and it's kind of really relevant for this module because we talk about shipping, we talk about trade, we talk about geopolitics. So it's the one that we will tend to focus on. This is Crimea. This is the bit that Russia wanted, essentially, and we think it's largely motivated by access to that port. You hopefully from Hewish Head Start and all the rest of it will have a bit of an overview, but what these located proportional symbols show you is where people have fled to as part of this forced migration, and you can see that Poland is definitely bearing the brunt of that increased population that's going on. And what we'll do is we'll update it with what's going on. That is a very potted history, that's really, really overly simplified, but it gives you some vague idea of the key messages of that case study. And then Kenya, we are using for what's called land grabbing, okay, and it's a bit controversial because it's land grabbing for conservation. So conservation, good thing, land grabbing, bad thing. Gets a bit complicated. Okay. So land grabbing is forcibly removing the current sort of people who live in a place, forcibly moving them away so that you can have the land. So as you can see, this is really up to date, really relevant stuff that's going on. Kenya's government is illegally evicting hunter-gatherers from their ancestral lands to profit from carbon offsetting schemes, human rights lawyers say. So carbon offsetting is, in the sense of climate change, a good thing, isn't it? Because we're trying, if you produce carbon, let's say you're an airline and you produce huge amounts of carbon dioxide every time you fly a plane around the world, what we're increasingly trying to get companies to do is to offset those carbon emissions by planting some trees or conserving some forest. Fab. But not if this is the end result. If we are then forcibly removing the people who are currently living there, that has a bit of a dark side, doesn't it? Anyway, you can see that there's all sorts of stuff about this, and as I said, in class you'll go into way more detail about it, but if I don't teach you and you don't have this PowerPoint, you can see what you need to be Googling in terms of looking up for this case study. And the reason you have Ukraine and Kenya is because the exam board are keen for you to have an example that isn't war. Most people associate forced migration and refugees with war, and actually that's not always strictly true. I would also massively encourage you to keep an eye on the news, watch a couple of documentaries, check out some of the stuff about forced migration. There's some really, really good stuff. And the other thing I will just talk to you about, if my PowerPoint wants to work, in 2024, so I'm making this video in the summer of 2024, and we were going to talk to you about the plan to send people who'd applied to Britain for asylum, to send them to Rwanda. We were going to talk to you about the Rwanda plan, but after the general election that we've had very recently, that plan has been scrapped by the incoming Labour government. So it doesn't seem very sensible to teach you about something that has been got rid of. But if you like a bit of politics and you like a bit of controversy, it is very interesting. And you could do an internet search for the British government's Rwanda plan. It has been scrapped. It's cost us millions of pounds, and it hasn't achieved anything at all. And it's now been scrapped. But it's quite interesting if you like a bit of juicy controversy to get your teeth into. Okay, right, thank you.